It started on a night when the rain refused to stop. The wind howled against the windows of the small house at the edge of Ashburn town. Inside, Ethan sat alone in the dim light of his study, flipping through pages of an old journal that didn't belong to him. The pages smelled of mildew and something older, something wrong. He had found the journal under a loose floorboard, hidden by the previous owner, or perhaps someone before even them. It wasn't his habit to pry into other people's secrets, but the way the floor creaked above it, as if inviting him, made his curiosity impossible to fight. On the first page, written in a trembling hand, was a single line. "What you dream is real. Be careful." Ethan laughed at first, dismissing it as the ramblings of a paranoid mind. But as the storm raged harder outside, he felt a strange pull to read on. Each page was filled with dreams, dreams of shadows whispering under the bed, dreams of voices calling from the attic, dreams that ended with blood on the walls. Ethan shivered, but he couldn't stop. At the bottom of each entry, the dreamer wrote one word, over and over again: true. He slammed the book shut, trying to steady his breathing. It was just a book. He told himself that 3 times, yet the howling wind sounded eerily like a voice repeating his name outside his window. "Ethan! Ethan!" A branch scraped against the glass, but in his mind it was a hand, pale and bony, tapping, tapping, tapping. He stood, his chair squealing on the wooden floor, and backed away. The room suddenly felt too small. He needed air. Grabbing his coat, he stepped outside into the biting rain, leaving the journal open on his desk behind him, on a page he hadn't read yet. On that page, scrawled in ink that looked almost fresh, was written, "Tonight, you will dream of her, and she will find you." Ethan barely slept that night. Yet when he did, sleep took him like drowning in a deep black ocean. He dreamed of the old house. Only the walls were bleeding, dripping rust-colored water down the cracked paint. He heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, dragging, heavy. He couldn't move in the dream, only watch as the door to his study creaked, open. A woman stood there. Her hair hung in wet ropes over her face, covering her eyes, but her mouth, God, her mouth, stretched wide in an impossible grin that split her cheeks open. She whispered, "I found you." He woke up screaming, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, the first fingers of dawn creeping through the curtains. It was just a nightmare. He repeated that all morning as he showered, dressed, and avoided the study. But by afternoon, he found himself back at the desk, the journal waiting, open to the same page. His hands trembled as he flipped to the next entry. The handwriting was different now, sharper, harsher. "She comes through the dream. She wears your thoughts like a mask. She is real now." A sound in the hallway made him jump. He turned, but the hallway was empty. Yet the smell of wet hair and mildew clung to the air behind him. By the 3rd night, sleep was a prison he couldn't escape. The dreams bled into his waking hours. He saw her in reflections, in the window while brushing his teeth, in the glass door of the oven, in the puddle by the garden path. Once he swore he saw her face in the steam on the bathroom mirror, smiling that torn smile. He called his friend Laura, desperate for someone to tell him he was losing his mind. Laura, a librarian by day and self-proclaimed skeptic by night, laughed nervously at his story. "Ethan, maybe lay off the old ghost stories for a bit, huh?" But when she visited to check on him, her smile faded the moment she stepped inside. "What's that smell?" she asked, sniffing the air. "Mildew," Ethan lied. She didn't press it, but her eyes lingered on the dark corners of the hallway. She stayed until dusk, promising to come by again the next day. That night, the dream came again. Only this time, the woman spoke clearly. "You let me out. I'm awake now." When he woke, his bedroom window was wide open, rain puddling on the floor. And on the inside of the glass, written with a wet finger, were the words, "Thank you." Laura didn't sleep well the night after she visited Ethan's house. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying his pale face, his trembling voice, the smell that clung to her clothes even after she got home. In her dreams, she heard a woman crying behind her closet door. When she dared to open it, the crying stopped, but there was a wet footprint on the floor, slowly drying in the moonlight. The next morning, she decided to visit Ethan again. She knocked. No answer. She knocked harder, calling his name. From inside, she heard what sounded like footsteps running upstairs, then silence. Worried, she fished the spare key from under the porch rock, the same place it had been since they were kids. She pushed open the door. The air inside was thick, humid, like a greenhouse rotting from the inside out. "Ethan?" she called, her voice echoing up the staircase. No answer. She forced herself up the stairs, each step groaning under her weight. At the end of the hallway, Ethan's bedroom door was ajar. She pushed it open slowly. The room was empty, but the walls were covered in pages torn from the journal, pinned up with rusty nails, some pages smeared with something dark, almost brown. And on every page the same word repeated, "Awake." Laura backed out of the bedroom, her breath quick and shallow. She nearly tripped over a pair of muddy footprints in the hallway, small, barefoot prints, as if a child had walked there, dripping wet. But they led nowhere. They simply vanished into the air halfway down the hall. A sudden sound behind her. A door creaking open. She spun, heart hammering, and glimpsed movement at the far end of the hallway. A figure. A woman. Her hair slick and dark, her dress clinging like wet paper. Laura's scream caught in her throat. The woman stepped closer, and Laura saw that her eyes were missing, hollow sockets, weeping black water that dripped to the floor. The smell of mold filled Laura's nose, choking her. She bolted, half tumbling down the stairs, slipping on the slick wooden steps. Outside, the sun felt unreal, too bright after the darkness of that house. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. But behind her, through the crack in the door, she thought she heard a laugh. Soft, gurgling, like air bubbling through water. 3 days passed before anyone saw Ethan again. Laura called his phone dozens of times, but it always went to voicemail. She returned to the house once, but it looked abandoned, the windows fogged with moisture from the inside. Out of desperation, she went to the local sheriff. But when they arrived together, the house was locked tight. No sign of forced entry, no smell, no footprints, just silence. Laura felt like she was losing her mind. Back at her apartment, she opened her backpack and froze. Inside, tucked between her books, was Ethan's journal. She didn't remember taking it. She didn't want to touch it, but it lay there, heavy as stone. Finally, at midnight, unable to resist, she flipped it open. The first page now read, "Hello, Laura. Dream of me." That night, Laura dreamed of the house. The walls pulsed like breathing skin. She stood at the top of the staircase, the air thick with steam and the stench of rot. From the bottom of the stairs, she heard Ethan's voice, distant, warped like an old recording. "Laura, help me. Don't wake up." She tried to scream, but her throat filled with water. A hand grabbed her ankle, cold, slimy, pulling her down the stairs into the darkness. She woke gasping, her sheets soaked, her lungs burning as if she had drowned and come back. On her ceiling, written in dripping letters, was one word: reality. Laura quit her job. She couldn't explain to her boss why she stared at reflections too long, why she avoided shadows, why her clothes always smelled faintly of stagnant water. She slept in her car some nights, terrified to go home. But no matter where she parked, the dreams found her. In every motel mirror, she saw the woman behind her shoulder. In every puddle by the roadside, she saw Ethan's pale face under the surface, mouth moving soundlessly. She stopped answering calls from friends. She knew they wouldn't understand. They'd only start to dream too. But the journal stayed with her. She tried burning it once. The fire guttered out, the pages wet and steaming but unburned. In the morning, it was back on her passenger seat, clean and dry, waiting for her to read again. Years passed, though Laura never truly knew how many. Time blurred when sleep and waking blended into the same rotting nightmare. By the time she found what remained of Ethan's house, it was no more than a moss-choked ruin buried in the woods, its walls half swallowed by vines and silence. She stepped inside one last time, clutching the journal to her chest, its pages now filled with her own dreams and nightmares too foul to speak aloud. She heard her name echo through the house, her own voice calling from every room. In the heart of the ruin, she found a broken mirror, crusted with mildew. She stared at her reflection and at the woman behind her shoulder, the same drowned face, the same smile torn too wide to be human. Laura finally understood. There was no escaping it. The journal had never been a record. It was a door. She pressed her hand to the glass, and on the other side, the woman did the same, mirroring her touch exactly. The world rippled, dream and reality folded together like wet paper, and Laura felt the cold seep into her bones as she whispered her last breath. "Wake up." Then, silence. In the ruins, the journal lay open, its final page blank except for 3 fresh words scrawled in dripping ink. "Dream me next."